Tonight on Bridge City News, Jason Kenney and the new UCP government were sworn in today. We will tell you who some of the new ministers are. The Alberta Court of Appeal shot down opponents of a law allowing gay-straight alliances in schools. And another Canadian has been sentenced to death in China. We will explain why.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Premier-designate Jason Kenney and his handpicked cabinet took their oaths and were sworn in today at the Government House in Edmonton. It was more of a low-key affair compared with the public celebrations of the previous NDP government, where thousands of people showed up at the legislature for that swearing-in. Some of the big appointments included Doug Schweitzer, who's the new Minister of Justice and the Solicitor General. Schweitzer will be pretty busy right away. Kenney said on day one of the UCP government, he would instruct the Attorney General to file with the Court of Appeal challenging the constitutionality of the federal carbon tax. Kenney says he will take the fight all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. Other notable appointees include Tyler Shandro, who's the new Minister of Health. Innisfail's Devin Dreeshen is the new Minister of Agriculture and Forestry. Richard McIver is the new Minister of Transportation. Adriana LaGrange from Red Deer will hold the education portfolio. Calgary MLA Sonia Savage is now the new Minister of Energy. Calgary MLA Josephine Pon is the new Minister of Seniors and Housing. And Rebecca Schultz got the Children's Services portfolio. Now, still with the UCP, the party announced today that in the first quarter, just over 50,000 donors donated over $8 million to the party. 2 of 3 Alberta Court of Appeal justices have dismissed an appeal by opponents of the law allowing gay-straight alliances in schools. Religious schools, public interest groups, and parents filed a lawsuit last year seeking to have the legislation put on hold until there was a ruling on the constitutionality. The coalition that was led by the Justice Centre for Constitutional Freedoms was denied its request, but it appealed. Dissenting Justice Bruce MacDonald wrote that schools should not have their funding withheld or lose their accreditation for the next academic year when the constitutional challenge is yet to be heard. Meanwhile, many publicly funded faith-based schools in Lethbridge have already begun implementing the bill, including those in the Holy Spirit School Division.
We've always looked at ensuring that we offer a very inclusive environment in our schools, and that's how we've approached it from a Catholic perspective. And so Bill 24 was something that we did, and we did without hesitation to support all kids.
A trial for a 75-year-old man charged with various offenses, including sexual assault and uttering death threats, began in Lethbridge Court. The man cannot be identified because his alleged victim was under 18 at the time of the alleged offenses. The court is hearing that they took place in a small southern Alberta town between 2013 and 2017, when the alleged female victim was between the ages of 13 and 17. The Chinook Sexual Assault Centre is teaming up with the Boys and Girls Club of Lethbridge to launch You Have the Power, a movement to end sexual violence.
May actually marks in the province of Alberta the Sexual Violence Awareness Month, and so as part of this month, the Chinook Sexual Assault Centre has come up with a campaign called You Have the Power. And so the theme is you have the power to end sexual violence. You have the power to say yes enthusiastically. You have the power to say no. You have the power over your body, things like this. And really to set the stage for people to be aware and to create that conversation in the community. We've partnered with the Boys and Girls Club, Lethbridge and District. They did a great I Stand Against event that actually focused on sexual violence. We got to hear a number of their young people speak about their own journeys in dealing with sexual violence or things that they've been through. And they really, there's a lot of youth there that are our future leaders. And so we really wanted to work with them to actually launch the event. It seems like the perfect place. We know that 15 to 24-year-olds youth are a primary target for sexual violence, and so it's important to plant the seed of discussion and also empowerment on how they can actually change the course of what's happening in our society.
Cassie says 1 in 3 women and girls, also 1 in 6 men and boys, will experience sexual assault in their lifetime. Lethbridge's United Services Institute President Glenn Miller left City Council chambers disappointed yesterday after a $67,000 request for a monument at Exhibition Park was denied. The bronze statue was in support of Alberta veterans. City Council did, however, agree to send a letter of support to assist in gaining provincial funding for the project. Last week, City Council approved funding $15,000 for the Sisters of St. Martha's Group to have a monument of their own. Miller says that it's impossible to compare the two requests.
Well, certainly they have a monument policy. At the last City Council, they chose to ignore the policy outright, but they had their debate, and the answer was favorable for that particular group. They asked for 15,000, and they got 15,000 without no fundraising. But that's two separate projects. That's apples and oranges.
The United Services Institute hopes to receive enough funding to display the monument in time for Remembrance Day. Now, speaking of monuments, the Sons of Norway Society in Lethbridge has generated their own funding and has been approved to put up a display of their own. The group was thrilled to finally make their vision a reality.
We're very happy to have the monument that we'd like to see here in Lethbridge approved so that we can put it in Henderson Lake where we wanted to put it, and so that we can remember our forefathers and our heritage, and others in Lethbridge can remember it as well.
But a member of our lodge stepped up and will move from the Crow's Nest Pass a large rock and install it by our tree in Henderson Park, which just excited us to no end. We can't not do this if this is going to happen. So it's really a great day to have the authorization to put this rock in Henderson Park right by our tree, right along the pathway to the Nukayuko Gardens. Lots of people are going to see it, so it's really an exciting event for us.
Park benches in Lethbridge will also have pieces of Norwegian heritage attached to them in remembrance of past settlers. Now, if you're looking to pick up a new hobby, you might want to check out a sport that is reaching new heights, literally. BCN's newest video journalist, Jeanette Rocher, tells us about the art of soaring and how anyone can do it.
So I'm just going to cheat a little bit, get above it.
At first glance, it looks like a video game. But this is how Pavan Kumar teaches new glider pilots how to fly.
So now that's really good lift.
He and his team reconstructed an old glider plane to build this simulator. Kumar is the chief flight instructor of the Lethbridge Soaring Club, one of 4 active glider clubs in Alberta.
This version of the club started in 2013, and since then we've managed to find a home at Cowley, which is just past Pincher Creek, about an hour west of Lethbridge.
But what they really want now is for more people to learn how to fly.
As we have this gorgeous two-seater gliders, actually. We have the hangar, we have a big field.
And they have the flight instructors to teach them.
Part of the instruction process is where we teach our future pilots to land safely, hopefully back at the airfield.
Students begin instruction in the simulator before moving on to the glider. They need to log a certain number of flights rather than log hours.
It's very safe. I'll say it's as safe as driving a car, I would say. Probably maybe sometimes safer.
A student can be as young as 12 years old, and there's no age limit beyond that. Flights last anywhere from several minutes to several hours. Kumar explains that they've even taken up people with disabilities.
One of the cool things that we're a part of is a charity called Freedom's Wings. And that is a program where we take people with disabilities and paraplegics particularly for inspirational flights once a year.
If you want more information about the Art of Soaring, the Soaring Club will be holding a public information session at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, May the 1st at the Crossings branch of Lethbridge Public Library.
I think the talk we have is about 40 minutes, and then the rest of the time will be for questions and for people to try out the simulator. Because it is quite a neat feeling to sit there. We have this head tracker where you put on a hat, and then when you turn your head, the screen actually moves with you so you can look around. It's just like you would in the plane. You'd look over your left shoulder to see what's out the left side of the plane. You could do the same thing on this simulator.
It's a relationship that's a century in the making. The Lethbridge Public Library celebrates its 100th anniversary this year.
Lethbridge Public Library, we're celebrating our 100th anniversary this year in 2019. So we're really excited because it's really, we think, a testament to the value of the public library in the community. We have been a community hub and a community gathering place for 100 years, and there's not a whole lot of organizations that can say that. So we're celebrating the year by basically, we have a few special events, but we also have a lot of kind of enhanced events going on. So we had, on February 14th, we had the opening of the exhibit at the Galt Museum that is about the history of the library in the community. So that's still ongoing until June 2nd. On August 14th, that's our official anniversary date, so we will be having kind of a formal event that day to acknowledge the anniversary. The details have not been fully ironed out for that. But on August 17th, we'll be having our big birthday party. So that'll be a really exciting day. We'll have lots and lots of things going on at the library. We'll have free food for people. We'll have performers and entertainers and activities. And it'll just be a big birthday party for us. And we're really excited about that.
The library will also spend this year hosting different events to help celebrate and foster their existing ties within the community. Lethbridge police busted 2 people and seized more than $60,000 worth of drugs following a routine traffic stop. On Thursday of last week, police pulled over a Chevy Silverado for equipment violations, but upon searching the vehicle, they found almost $47,000 in carfentanil, heroin with a street value of $8,000, meth valued at almost $1,100, along with many other capsules and pills. Police also seized a hatchet, machete, and brass knuckles. 39-year-old Larry Healy Jr. and 19-year-old Shakira Youngpine face a long list of charges including drug trafficking and carrying a concealed weapon. Youngpine made her first court appearance on Friday, and Healy will make his first court appearance on May the 2nd. Lethbridge police need our help finding a suspect in connection with a couple of armed robberies. The Co-op gas bar on University Avenue was robbed on Sunday, and the Urban Cellars along Micmac Boulevard was robbed on Monday. No one was injured during each robbery. Police describe the suspect for both robberies as male, 5'8" to 5'11" inches tall, with an average to athletic build. He was wearing an Under Armour hoodie with light, tight green pants. In both cases, he was covered and wearing ski goggles. If you have any information that can help police, call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. Family members of a missing mother and daughter who Calgary police believed were killed have issued a statement thanking everyone who has helped with the search. 25-year-old Jasmine Lovett and 22-year-old Alia Sanderson have not been seen since April 16th. They were reported missing a week later after they failed to show up for a family dinner. The Lovett family issued a statement through police late yesterday saying their hearts are shattered. Police say a suspect in the case may have tried to burn evidence and are urging the public to report any unusual fires in a rugged area outside of Calgary. An investigation is underway after a male construction worker died at the Fort Hills oil sands site in northern Alberta. Ledcor spokesperson David Hoff says the accident occurred yesterday afternoon while the worker was doing maintenance at the Suncor site. Hoff says both Ledcor, Suncor, and a government agency are conducting investigations into the incident. A spokesperson with Alberta Occupational Health and Safety says personnel have been dispatched to the scene. An estimated 1 million sandbags are now standing between the Ottawa River and businesses in our nation's capital as floodwaters continue to rise. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says extreme weather events are going to occur more often, and his government is committed to investing in climate-resilient infrastructure.
We recognize that there is an increasing reality that almost every year we're dealing with people having to evacuate their homes, protect their homes from rising floodwaters. These extreme weather events are going to happen more often. We have increased water in the spring in eastern Canada, increased droughts in the prairies as well, as we've seen with some out-of-control grass fires over the past weeks. We know we're going to have to be investing in climate-resilient infrastructure, in mitigation and adaptation in the fight against climate change. And yes, we're going to have to help Canadians adapt to the new reality we're in, and that means going to be working with homeowners, working with municipalities on land planning, and being a strong partner for the changes Canada is facing.
Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland says she is very concerned about a Canadian who was sentenced to death in China. The Canadian was convicted for being part of a major drug operation. The sentence is likely to further already strained relations between Ottawa and Beijing.
Canada stands firmly opposed to the use of the death penalty everywhere around the world. We think that this is a cruel and inhumane punishment which should not be used in any country. We are obviously particularly concerned when it is applied to Canadians.
Fire and debris rained from the sky yesterday over a suburban Honolulu community in a helicopter crash that killed all 3 people on board. A witness says they saw red flames as the helicopter hit the earth. The FAA is investigating.
Heard a loud popping sound and then a crash. I was right around the corner, I saw it. Dive down, hit the ground. Terrible.
First and foremost, our hearts go out to those impacted by this horrific crash here today in Kailua. Honolulu EMS, the Kailua unit, was responding on another call right here when they heard a horrific bang. They turned around and they saw the helicopter on fire. When they got there, neighbors were doing a heroic job trying to put out the fire and also trying to get the patients away from the burning aircraft.
And so we came out and we looked at the car and we were really confused, and then we heard screaming and the word fire, and I saw smoke over there, and so we walked over to the corner and we saw the helicopter on fire.
A beluga whale found with a tight harness that appeared to be Russian-made was raised the alarm of Norwegian officials. It prompted speculation that the animal may have escaped from a Russian military facility. Military whales, I never would have thought of that. We had kind of a mixed bag today weather-wise. Sun, cloud, a little bit cooler. There's also some rain in the forecast. I'll have complete weather details coming up in just a moment. A cooler day in the Windy City. Tonight, a 30% chance of rain developing and a low near -5. Tomorrow, an increasing risk of rain developing and a high near 10 degrees. Thursday, mainly cloudy day with a high near 12. Friday, lots of sunshine and the mercury climbing to 19. A low pressure system returns on Saturday, bringing more clouds and showers and a high of 14. Rain and 9 degrees on Sunday. A good chance of showers and 9 again on Monday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 16 and an average low of 2. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1968 at 27 degrees, and the record low was -9 in 1954. Sunrise was at 6:11, sunset at 8:46. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria will be mainly sunny and 17, mostly cloudy and 14 for Vancouver. Showers and 7 is expected in Calgary tomorrow. Rain and 6 for Edmonton. Regina will be mostly sunny and 8. Saskatoon will have clouds mixed with sun and a high of only 6. Winnipeg will have rain and 9 degrees on Wednesday. Showers and 9 as well for Toronto. Ottawa, which has been dealing with so much flooding, will have more rain mixed with snow and a high of only +1. Montreal will also have rain but should see a high near 4. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be partly cloudy and 9. Halifax and Nova Scotia will also hit 9 degrees. Charlottetown, PEI will have sun mixed with cloud and a high of 7. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain mixed with snow and a high near 5 tomorrow. Big news for the auto industry. Toyota announced that it will be building the new Lexus NX SUV at its Cambridge, Ontario plant. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says that reaffirms the company's commitment to Canada.
It really is such a pleasure to be here to celebrate as Toyota reaffirms its long-term commitment to Canada with a significant investment worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The Cambridge plant will produce the new Lexus NX and state-of-the-art NX hybrid right here, supplying the entire North American market. It's truly an honor for Canada to be chosen for this production. After all, the Lexus is Toyota's premium vehicle and only the world's best plants, employing the most skilled and reliable workers, can earn a Lexus mandate. This company understands what Canada brings to the table as we compete in a global marketplace.
International Trade Minister Jim Carr says Canada is looking for new Asian customers for canola in response to China's ban on many shipments of the product. He says Ottawa is pushing Beijing to allow a Canadian delegation to visit China to verify complaints that Canadian canola is contaminated with pests. So far, China has not agreed to requests for a Canadian delegation to test its unproven concerns. China has rejected Canadian canola seed shipments in recent months and has suspended the licenses of 2 major Canadian exporters. The Heart of Our City Committee presented their annual report to Lethbridge City Council. Ainsley O'Reilly explains how the group outlines some of the challenges downtown Lethbridge has faced this year.
We're going to see newer entrepreneurs. We're starting to see a younger demographic of business owners coming into our downtown. And it's not your traditional businesses that you're seeing. So we're seeing more in the creative sector, more in the information technology sector, more in those kinds of startup or co-working, port, those kinds of activities where it's not your traditional business model.
The Heart of Our City Committee is right. It's all about perception. And yes, downtown Lethbridge has had its issues, but that hasn't stopped new businesses from setting up camp.
Right, the downtown is the core of any city, and it's up to all of us to make sure that our downtown is thriving because, as I said, it's the heartbeat, right? You don't want your heartbeat to be ignored. So us coming down here, it was always downtown. We didn't even think of other places, like it wasn't an option for us. It was, we're going downtown, whether or not that be to help revitalize it and get more businesses here, get newer attractions downtown, whatever that may be. It was, for us, it was, this is where we need to be.
Stonefire Pizza opens its doors in just a week's time, and the authentic Neapolitan pizzeria wants not only to include the vibrancy of downtown today, but also Lethbridge's rich history. The building was built in 1963.
I love this building because it was Lethbridge's first mall. And a mall back then, of course, was a strip mall. This had a common entrance where you could go to the three businesses. And the original three businesses were Lil Darlin's, which was a children's wear store. And then there was Southern Stationers, which is a real household name here for many years in Lethbridge. And then also Hoyt's Hardware, which was another staple business that was here for many, many years.
Tuesday, May 7th is the grand opening for Stonefire Pizza Company, and they'll also be hosts to Tastes of Lethbridge, where folks can come in and try over 465,000 pizza combinations. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories of this hour, Premier Designate Jason Kenney and his handpicked cabinet took their oaths and were sworn in today at the Government House in Edmonton. Now, some of the big appointments included Judge Schweitzer, who is the new Minister of Justice, Calgary MLA Sonia Savage, who's the new Minister of Energy, Innisfail's Devin Dreeshen is the new Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, Tyler Shandro, the Minister of Health, and Calgary MLA Josephine Pond, who's the new Minister of Seniors and Housing. Lethbridge's Nathan Newdorf did not receive a cabinet position. Anti-Semitism is on the rise in many areas of the world, including right here in North America. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Come for a theatrical experience to Jake's Gift, a moving story of a World War II veteran's reluctant return to Juno Beach on Saturday, May 4th at the Lethbridge Legion. This multi-award-winning play features the performance by its playwright, Julia Mackey. Tickets are $20 per person and are available at the Lethbridge Legion office. Doors open at 2 p.m. with the show beginning at 3. To learn more about this play, visit jakesgift.com. Join your neighbors and take part in Lethbridge's Spring Reuse Rendezvous, taking place this Saturday, May 4th from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. This gives residents the opportunity to give away or collect usable items for free. Place your items suitable to reuse in front of your residence Friday evening. Ensure that they're marked free. Then Saturday morning, people are invited to cruise the streets and help themselves to these free items. The annual Coulee Cleanup, organized by the Helen Schuler Nature Center, will continue until May 31st. This is a great opportunity for individuals, families, sports teams, and community groups to help protect our fragile environment. Register by calling 403-320-3064 or email hsnc@lethbridge.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
A U.S. college student was arrested in the California Synagogue shooting. The suspect of the shooting, John Ernest, was reportedly inspired by the New Zealand mosque killings. Joining me now to talk about it is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, the rabbi at the synagogue says the gunman's weapon jammed, which actually prevented a bloodbath.
Yeah, can you imagine? The rabbi is looking on the bright side of things today and looking at the situation as it could have been much worse. you think about the vulnerability of worshipers in their place of sanctity, in their place of peace, gathered. Not only was it the Sabbath, it's also the last day of Passover, gathered in the Chabad house in Southern California. The last thing on their minds is that someone who hates them with such a deep-seated emotion of hate would come in there and try to take their lives. Awful, awful, and this is happening way too often. And unfortunately, the conversation in the days that follow are about Donald Trump and about gun control, but not about this resurgence of anti-Semitism and hate and all over. I mean, whether you talk about the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting or even New Zealand, it was a mosque shooting, but where does this hate come from and what can we do to combat it? And that should be the ultimate or the larger conversation in situations like this to prevent them from happening again and again.
You know, we had a recent report saying that anti-Semitism is on the rise here in Canada. More than 2,000 cases of harassment, vandalism, and violence took place last year. Now, Lisa, the New York Times is getting in on the action. They got into a problem recently when they ran an anti-Semitic cartoon involving Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Tell me more about that.
This cartoon was awful. If you were able to see it, it's truly anti-Semitic. There's no other way to, I mean, if you didn't know anything else and I showed you this cartoon, you'd think it came from a Nazi magazine of the 40s and late 30s. It's horrific. And the way that it's portrayed, and when you think about the New York Times and how difficult it is to get an op-ed in there, to get, you know, a cartoon in there, to get a column in there, this doesn't just happen. This isn't just something that, you know, an intern slipped in there and it got published. This is systematic. And, you know, the apologies come, but, you know, how much of this can we tolerate as a society? And this is 2019. I mean, to have groups not feel comfortable and to have the mainstream media portray our president in this way. I mean, on the one hand, they call him an anti-Semite and they say that the shooting in San Diego happened because of him. And on the other, they say, you know, he's being pulled by the Jewish lobby or Netanyahu, or, you know, he's owned by the Jews or whatever this cartoon was trying to depict. So which one is it? And the mainstream media has this way of just, you know, through emotion, trying to really change the minds of readers. And again, where are the facts? Fake news prevails, and it's an ugly, ugly thing when, you know, a minority group like the Jews, who have been so comfortable living in the United States and have, you know, played such a role, whether it's in medicine or technology or business, and really consider themselves Americans, first and foremost, have to take a step back and say, are we really welcome here? Are we really safe here? Do we really belong here? And it's an awful feeling. And as you said, it's on the rise here in the United States as well. In 2017, there was an exponential jump in cases. And as you said, in Canada as well. So no more justifications, no more blaming of anything. I mean, we have to get to the root of this and have this stop.
You know, it's terrible. I've seen the cartoon as well. It's Donald Trump blind, and Netanyahu's his blind dog. You know, he's pulling him along. It's terrible. You think to yourself, you know, you and I are both journalists, and these guys need to be held accountable, the New York Times. But at the same time, we know that print is suffering right now. They're hurting. It's all about selling papers, isn't it? For them.
It is. To them, it is, but it's also about being, you know, I always say it's a news business and not a news service, right? So they're more after making that dollar than, you know, than telling the truth, which is such a sad reality for everyone, for journalists and news consumers alike. Which is why I just did a TED Talk on fake news and how to actually get real news. And the bottom line is you have to go to multiple sources in order to even get half the truth, if that's even being put out there. But here in this country, we have an epidemic because the desire to paint the president, and again, this country will suffer because this president will be out of office, whether it's first term or second term. When he leaves office, the post of the President of the United States will be a diminished post because of all this disrespect, because of the way that the media now treats the White House, the way that the fake news has gone rampant in order to paint such an ugly picture, where they trust, the gunmen or ISIS or, the Iranian regime or Syria more than they trust the president of the United States. And when you're trying to have that kind of bottom line, and when your goal is to really smear an individual rather than tell the accurate facts, then we're never going to get down to what's really going on. We're never going to protect our national security. We're never going to really get the truth on our economy. We're never going to get the truth on many other things. So we're suffering as a nation because of it. And I know you feel that in Canada and Mexico, our neighbors feel this. We're stronger, and we're stronger together. And when the U.S. is diminished, the entire world truly is diminished. And Ronald Reagan got that very well. And you'd hope that, nowadays, the media, the entire, White House, that it would be better understood that if we prosper together.
Lisa, a recent report from the BBC says one of the key suspects in the Sri Lankan Easter attacks, Zaran Hashim, was killed. Investigators are probing the extent of Islamic State involvement in the Sri Lankan blasts.
Right. So if we kind of rewind to last week when the Sri Lankan attack occurred, first there was a local group that took responsibility, and all eyes were on these few individuals. But then ISIS as a whole took responsibility. So now the question is, to what extent does ISIS play a role in local attacks, and to what extent do they just dictate or kind of pass it off and find recruits locally and say, we need you to take care of business? Regardless, we know that there was a local cell that was growing, and where a lot of these extremists were congregating and living in one place. What's also surprising in this particular case is that many of these suicide bombers, and again, suicide bombers usually come from the lowest socioeconomic brackets. They're desperate. They need that check to feed their families. Many of them came from educated and wealthy families. So what possesses an individual to want to strap a bomb onto their body and end their lives and end the lives of others when they do come from that type of a background, being educated, having all the means in the world, etc. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered here, and that's why you have all these different investigations to see the extent of ISIS and its tentacles in Sri Lanka and that part of the world. We talk about ISIS dying down in Syria and Iraq. Where are they growing? We look at these types of families. We generally don't look at these types of families as targets for recruitment. It's usually, again, those that are suffering and need that kind of those kinds of resources. So again, a lot of investigation going on here and a lot of questions that remain unanswered.
Twitter has always been known for a place where you find many trolls, people who love to argue. You and I have known that personally as well. It's also a place where police have been finding online extremism, which has led to many arrests. Let's talk more about that.
Yes, and again, the question being, when these extremists are being taken out out of the battlefield, where are they going? And the answer always is on social media, where they have been the most successful with regards to growth and recruitment and getting their propaganda spread like wildfire, whether it's on the web or even on the dark web, where they can hide even better. So the challenge for social media platforms, and these are again American platforms that can and are private entities, in taking down these accounts, is that needle in a haystack. There are so many of these accounts. For example, when today the news came out that this Poway, the San Diego area synagogue shooter, his case was referred to the FBI about 5 minutes before he carried out that shooting. Now, how was that even found? Well, his manifesto was on his Facebook page. He didn't say where and he didn't say when, but how can authorities be sure that this is not a hoax? How can they really allocate their resources to these what could be false alarms? And then if they do take every single one of these threats seriously, how do they act upon them without any more evidence or any more information? So it's very, very daunting, but they're coming even with more frequency onto social media. And again, how do you differentiate between a fanboy or fangirl and an actual perpetrator, somebody who's going to carry out that crime or that terrorist attack? So it's very daunting. It's extremely difficult and challenging. But I would like to believe that these social media companies are on it and they do consider this a priority right now.
Absolutely. Diplomatic tensions are on the rise between Canada and China over the arrest of the Huawei executive and the embargo on Canadian canola. Now, Lisa, tensions are rising also between the U.S. and China on aggressive acts by fishing boats.
Yes. China's very innovative, and we know that in many ways, whether it's their products and their technology or the ways in which they have tried to use espionage tactics to get technology secrets and other secrets and use them against us here in the West. And the U.S. has recently become more cognizant of the fact that we have to watch out, whether it's this woman who walked onto Mar-a-Lago with a USB and other types of technology. What was she trying to do? What was she, who hired her, who put her there? How did she get there, etc. To these fishing boats that have been going on and drifting into areas where they shouldn't, to other types of espionage, trying to collect information, trying to use copycat tactics in patented technology, etc. So we know that they're up to no good. And again, that trade deal, if it goes through, it will all depend on enforcement of that deal and enforcement and China really policing itself to act better and do better by the West if they want to play in the big boys league, in the economy, on the world stage, etc. If they want to normalize relations, they have to be behaving much better.
I'm glad you brought up the trade deal, Lisa. Word from the World Economic Forum says both the U.S. and China need to show a little bit of flexibility when it comes to trade talks. Tell me more about that.
Whenever there's no resolution, that's what can be said. Both sides need to be more flexible. You can say that about our married couple, and you can say that about North Korea and the U.S., and you can say that about China and the U.S. We're not coming to any resolution. So yes, both sides have to concede more. Both sides have to be more flexible. I think what we're seeing here is that the U.S. has definitely more leverage. The Chinese are playing along because they want this deal, but the U.S. has some non-negotiables. And again, that being that China has to play by some rules, and China is not used to playing by rules. If you remember when Donald Trump was just a guest on random talk shows on Fox News and in other places, he was not even a candidate yet. His biggest platform and his biggest, aha moment about how to fix the U.S. economy with regards to trade was to curb China. He was saying it until he was blue in the face, and then he became a candidate and he ran on that platform, and then he became President Trump, and he still continues on this belief that we truly have to curb the Chinese in order to get a good deal out of them. So I think we have them in a place because of all the tariffs that we believe, or Donald Trump believes by his calculation, that they will come to the table and they will have to concede. So when we talk about flexibility, we're hoping that China shows some of that flexibility so we can all be put out of our misery and go forward and have a deal with China.
Iran's foreign minister, Mohammad Zarif, is accusing the United States of trying to bring Iran to its knees and overthrow its government by seeking to thwart its international oil trade, Lisa.
Yes, if you're able to catch any of Foreign Minister Zarif's media tour, he did the Sunday shows this weekend, and he continues to go around. He speaks almost perfect English, and he continues to deceive. This is a man who has blood on his hands. He represents the Iranian regime, which has blood on its hands, and he is going around pointing fingers and saying, well, it might not be Donald Trump who wants to confront the Iranian regime. It might not be him who's going to be lured into something of an escalation with Iran, but those around him, including John Bolton and the Saudis and Israel, those characters are pushing him and influencing him in a way that they shouldn't. So a lot of diplomatic talk, a lot of blaming, but when he was pushed back on a lot of questions regarding human rights, regarding the Iranians back at home, the irony of it all is that he comes here, he uses our First Amendment to say anything he wants to say, but back at home, Iranians are taken off of Facebook, taken off of Twitter, taken off of Instagram, arrested for their blog posts and what they say or write or publish. And the hypocrisy is just so loud and so eerie. But when are we going to see some changes from the Iranian regime? That's what sanctions are for, and we're hoping that that is the message here. The United States is not trying to punish the Iranian people. We stand by the Iranian people and the human rights abuses. Donald Trump has said that many, many, many times, and the sanctions are meant more so, even though they will affect the people, more so to curb the Iranian regime, to cut their oil sales, to cut the central banking system, and to perhaps influence some real behavioral change over there.
Now, Iran says it may withdraw from the nuclear treaty after U.S. President Trump restored sanctions. Are people a little worried about that?
You know, this is more muscle flexing and saber rattling by the Iranian regime. They've been doing this for years. So, you know, in one breath, they'll say, well, it wasn't us who withdrew from the Iran deal, it was the Americans. And then in one breath, they'll say, well, we also can withdraw from nuclear treaties. And we would have withdrawn from the deal anyway. And we don't want this and we don't want that. So a lot of this chest thumping that we've seen from the Iranian regime, a lot of it's propaganda. And the truth is they're suffering. And the numbers and the economy has truly been diminished to a place where they're suffering. And that just says it all. So the sanctions are working, and that's what they're meant to do.
Lisa, we only have a few short moments left here. In other news, the United States and Turkey are playing chicken over Russia, and it has to do with Turkey's plan to purchase a missile defense system from Russia.
Yes, well, they've been playing footsie for a very long time. And, you know, everyone, especially Turkey, has been very equal opportunity about making new friends in the region and turning from the U.S. and turning to the U.S. as enemies, including Iran and Russia in this case. But the Russians are standing back and waiting for a reaction out of the United States. Will we enter into a new treaty is the question, or will Russia go rogue and buy a new missile defense system, new weapons system, continue making these weird and awkward new alliances with Turkey and continue its relationship with North Korea and Venezuela and Iran and, you know, all of the rogue actors that, of course, the U.S. will not approve of. But again, this is a different calculation that Donald Trump has, and he is waiting to see how he can curb the Russians in a different way. But, you know, I think maybe the reason why this topic hasn't been broached by the White House yet is that they're waiting for all of the investigations to be cleared so that there's no connection between the White House and Russia from previous investigations, and we go forward and we have a clear foreign policy with Russia, which is what we need and we want.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks, Lisa.
My pleasure.
In today's world, truth and morality have gone from having a standard to now becoming very relative, without any absolutes. The existence of God is always doubted. Joining me now from Calgary to discuss this is Jojo Ruba, the Executive Director of Faith Beyond Belief. Welcome back to BCN, Jojo.
Glad to be here.
So first of all, what is your group, Faith Beyond Belief, all about?
Well, the name itself actually speaks to it. We believe that often when we talk about faith, we talk about a blind faith or a leap of faith. And we really want Christians particularly, but everyone else as well, to understand that faith is actually more than just wishful thinking, that we actually have good reasons to believe what we do. And the Bible actually uses the word faith more like the word trust. And you don't just give trust away. Trust has to be earned because there's good reasons to believe.
Some would argue today that there's no such thing as an absolute truth. What do you say to people like that?
Well, I ask them if they believe that absolutely, and if they believe that's true absolutely. Right? Because at the end of the day, everyone has to believe in some sort of truth. And the way we define truth is just an accurate understanding of reality, that we actually live and know that there are certain things that we have to accept in order to live in the world. So, for example, the way we talk about truth is it's like having an accurate GPS system. If your mapping system does not work, you get lost. And people need truth in order to make sure they don't get lost.
Now, we often hear politicians say, oh, I misspoke. I didn't mean to say that. You know, the public, they kind of roll their eyes a little bit, knowing full well that that politician lied. Are young people being influenced by this?
Well, I would suggest that the fact that journalists and politicians are often on the bottom of most polling when they ask, who do you trust most? And I'm sorry to say, it's true, journalists and politicians are near the bottom. The problem is often pastors and religious leaders are also near the bottom in terms of trust. So we have to really rebuild that ability to say, yeah, there are actually authorities that can speak to these kinds of things. The problem is we live in a generation that think they're the authority because they can Google something or they can look something up on Wikipedia. And I think there has to be, again, that level of trust that we need to rebuild.
You know, and I truly believe that truth is necessary for society to function properly. Most people would still agree that truth in business transactions, in marriage relationships is really necessary for things to go well. What are your thoughts?
Well, part of it is we need to define truth properly, right? There's subjective truth, which are opinions and preferences. You know, your favorite kind of music or donut or whatever. That's up to you. But there's also objective truths, and the objective truths are true regardless of how you feel about them. And the challenge for us is to actually define those terms and decide which category things like moral truth or religious truth fall into. Most Canadians think it's subjective preference truths, when in fact the Christian claim at least says it's objective truth. And what I like to tell people is, look, there's a lot of things about Christianity or the Bible I don't like, but that doesn't make it false, because the religious claims that we make as Christians about Jesus' death and resurrection are either true or not. They can't just be true for you.
Now, the definition of what is right and what is wrong seems to have changed a lot over the years. How should society define what is moral and what is evil? Is it simply a democratic process?
Well, and that's part of the problem is we do live in a society that's a democracy, but that to think somehow that we can decide right and wrong. But as a democracy, we also believe in such things called human rights. And human rights are guaranteed in our charter, and we have rights that supersede or surpass what the government can do. The problem is if it's from something other than the government, it has to be an authority higher than the government that exists before and in any place at any time. Time and place don't limit that authority. And by definition, that's always been God. And that's why the preamble to the Canadian Charter of Rights is that we believe human rights come from God.
Now, many people argue that God does not even exist because if he did, why does he allow evil to happen, whether it's earthquakes, flooding, the shootings, and so forth? So how do you respond to that?
A friend of mine actually asked that question. How can you be a Christian if so much evil exists in the world? And I simply asked her, well, what do you mean by evil? Because evil, by definition, from a Christian point of view, is the corruption of what is good. Just like rust cannot exist without metal, metal can exist on its own. Evil cannot exist on its own. This is just simply a corruption of what is good. So in fact, if you agree that moral evil exists, it's actually good evidence that there's a moral good that exists as well, which is God.
So what do you say to those who ask, how can we know for certain that God exists? I mean, we look at the mountains, the sky, the sunsets, the birth of a beautiful baby. But what else is there for miracles to prove that God exists?
Well, there's several things I would say, but I would even just add simply asking that question suggests to me that there's a supernatural order. C.S. Lewis says it this way: if we desire for answers, like the answer, meaning for life, or the meaning for why we're here, the purpose of our existence, if we look for answers and we can't find them in the physical world, that means we must have answers that are found in the spiritual world. And that's, I think, really the best point for that is, at the end of the day, if we want answers beyond our Darwinian material world and that there's spiritual reality, that means there has to be a source for that spiritual reality, and that would be God.
So how about the big question, who made God?
Well, and that's a wonderful question. And when atheists ask that question, my first question and response is, well, what do you mean by God? See, the Christian understanding of God is the uncaused cause. If you believe the universe had a beginning out of nothing, that means the universe must have started by someone who was not made of matter or energy, who lived outside of time. And if that person lives outside of time, he doesn't need a beginning. He doesn't need a cause.
Now, since God exists, how do you know which of the gods is the real one? Or some may say that there are in fact many gods, as the Hindus believe.
Well, again, that's a great point. And one of the points we like to make is that's why you test it out, just like if you make a claim. One of the examples we use is a police lineup. You know, when you bring someone and they try to find out who the actual person responsible is, police put them in a lineup. And that's the same thing. You put all of the different religious and worldviews together as a lineup and you test them. One of my friends was an atheist, or was at least not a real Christian. And he did exactly that. He put all these worldviews together and said, which one makes the most sense based on our understanding of science, on philosophy, and even on our just simple logic. And he said Christianity comes out. And here's why. Christianity is actually testable. You can easily prove Christianity wrong if Jesus is not raised from the dead.
Yeah, it's the basis of our faith, absolutely. Now, some of our viewers will remember Professor Anthony Flew, once one of the world's most renowned atheists. Now, he eventually admitted that there is some kind of God out there. Apparently, what convinced him was the complexity of the universe and the human body, which points to an intelligent designer.
Yeah, in fact, it's actually DNA particularly that helped convince him that, because DNA is a language. And languages can only be created by an intelligence, not by random chance. And even though he never became a Christian, he at least admitted that the universe, the human design, was made by someone, not a something.
Now, Jojo, what do you say to people that say all faiths are equal? Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, they're all equal, and you'll all find God in the same way. What do you say to people like that?
Well, I want to reiterate the fact that there's a difference between the adherence of a faith and the faith itself. So I would say, yes, Muslims, Christians, Jewish people are equal in value, absolutely. But all of their religious claims contradict, right? Some of those religions teach there's one God. Some religions teach there's many gods. There are even religions teach that there are no God. Can all of those religious views be true at the same time? Of course not, because they contradict themselves. And the challenge that Jesus leaves with us, in fact, the Apostle Paul says it very well. He says, if the Jesus was not resurrected, the Christian faith is futile to believe in. And that's really the crux of it. If Jesus was who he claimed to be, he proved it by dying and rising again, that proves Christianity, and that shows that all the other religions that reject Jesus as Messiah as false. And really, I think that's where you have to go back to test the religious views, because they can't all be right.
A number of years ago, I had an interesting conversation with an imam in Pickering, Ontario, and that's what he said. He said, we have a lot of love and respect for your Jesus. He's mentioned in the Quran even more than Muhammad. He's a mighty prophet. I said, but that's the big difference. We believe he's the Son of God. He died and rose again, but you don't believe that he rose again, right? He said, that's right. Well, I said, if I believe that, then I'd be dead in my faith. That's the big difference between you and I. And what Jesus said, too, is that no one comes to know the Father except through me. So that's, I guess, the fundamental difference. Yeah, the only way you can come to know God is through Jesus. He said so himself.
Well, and that's the Christian story, right? And there are other religious claims, of course. But as one atheist discovered, and she was challenged by her husband, if you're going to investigate different religious claims, start with the one that's easy to disprove, right? That's what Christianity is. Christianity actually offers a way to test it. When Luke wrote his epistle to his friend Theophilus, he said, I've investigated everything carefully. This is Luke chapter 1, verse 1-4, so that you may know the exact truth of what you've been taught. The Bible cares if what we believe is true, not just for us, but true objectively. It's the way we say, as Greg Koukl says, it's the story of reality, of how reality actually is. It's centered around Jesus.
So Jojo, some people have asked me, Hal, if God really does exist, why doesn't he just reveal himself to us? Not through nature or through sunrise to sunset, but just say hello.
It's funny, people mention that. And it's interesting, if God were to write in the sky with his finger, I am here, some atheists have already talked about this, then they say they wouldn't believe that. They would think of some scientific rationale for what they saw, or a mass hallucination. Because you can't make someone who does not want to believe. I think God speaks solidly to the fact that he will give the evidence that's necessary to believe. And Romans 1 talks about that with nature, but it's simply even asking for logic and reason, the existence of the universe, all of those things point to a designer of some sort. And the Christian story is that designer showed himself when he became a human being through the person of Jesus Christ. So the answer is he's already done it.
Some of the imams I've chatted with in the past as well say that ours is not so much a religion, but it's more a political movement. What are your thoughts when you hear stuff like that?
I think when it comes to these different religious views, they're all worldviews in some sort. They're all ways of understanding reality. And Islam particularly is a very cultural religion, which means it has something to say about every aspect of culture, including government. And I don't fault them for that. That's part of their worldview. The question is their worldview based on the right understanding of its creator, of our designer? And this is where we would differ, because in their worldview, their God is a singular person who does not experience relationship unless he creates someone else. The Trinity, the Christian God, teaches that God already experiences relationship, already knows what it's like to love someone because he's already in a relationship and wants to extend that relationship with others. So right away, we already see the relational God versus the Islamic God, who is a distant, far away God who can't be in relationship with us unless he made us. Right? And I think that's very different.
What's interesting as well, Jojo, is I've had a chance to interview some Buddhist monks, and they were telling me that Buddhism is more a philosophy, not really a religion, like Christianity.
Right. Yeah. And different sects of Buddhism actually teach that there is no God. And it's all focused on the individual who's an individual Buddhist trying to find his or her way into some sort of higher state. And again, the question is, if there is no God, who decides what the higher state is? It's like having speeding limits that are not enforced by anybody and are not actually created by anybody. Well, why do you follow that? If your neighbor put a stop sign in front of your house and it was just a handmade little sign, would you stop? Well, of course not, because it has no authority. And in the same way, if there are moral laws, they have to be given by a moral lawgiver, as C.S. Lewis said, who has the authority to make the laws and the power to enforce them. Buddhism can't find that answer if there's no God.
So, Jojo, would you agree that the fundamental difference then between Christianity and a lot of the other religions out there is that other religions preach you get to heaven by your works, but with Christianity, the work's already been done?
Well, yeah, that's definitely the big part of what the Christian story is. But it really goes back to the character of God. The Christian story says there is a maker of the universe who does not need us, but loves us. And we know that love out of his triune relationship. And we know that love because there's evidence he came down as a human being to die and was resurrected. So it's not just the teaching, it's the example that Christianity offers compared to other world religions.
Jojo Ruba, the Executive Director of Faith Beyond Belief, thanks a lot for joining me today from Calgary.
Glad to be here.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.